Thanks, Taoiseach. It's almost 2.5 years now since Stormont collapsed. At such a critical time, with the progression of Brexit, and that the majority of the people in the north of Ireland and the community up there obviously are Remainers, and the north of Ireland potentially so hugely impacted and exposed. So can I ask you, has any progress been made in terms of restoring the power sharing institutions?
I propose to take questions 9, 20 and 34 together. Let's get on, Corla. The continuing absence of vital institutions of the Good Friday Agreement is a source of deep concern for the Government, as it is for the British Government. The Government will continue to do everything in its power in accordance with the responsibilities as co-guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement to secure the effective operation of all of its institutions. Secretary of State Bradley and I met with leaders of the 5 main political parties at Stormont on the 15th of February, further to our respective consultations with each of the parties in January. This meeting sought the parties' views at this stage on how a new talks process could most constructively be commenced in the period immediately ahead. Each of the party leaders confirmed their wish to participate in the institutions again and provided views on the necessary basis for an effective talks process. It was agreed that the two governments would engage further with the parties to seek an urgent way forward with a new political process that can secure an agreement for a functioning executive and assembly. Following these further consultations, the Government does not underestimate the way to go in achieving a resolution, but continues to believe that this can be achieved and that there is an increasingly urgent need for talks to recommence. The 2-year absence of the devolved institutions can't be allowed to continue. There are pressing decisions and issues across a range of areas which require a functioning executive and assembly. The devolved institutions of the agreement are also urgently needed so that the Assembly and power sharing executive can represent the interests of all the people in Northern Ireland and address issues of concern, including the challenges for Northern Ireland resulting from the UK decision to leave the European Union. The North-South Ministerial Council is also essential to oversee and develop North-South cooperation on matters of mutual interest, as provided for in the Good Friday Agreement. The legislation that was brought forward by the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, which temporarily suspends the requirement to call an Assembly election, underlines the urgent requirement for all with responsibilities to do everything in their power to get them operating again. I'm continuing to work with the Secretary of State and remain in regular contact with the leaders of each of the political parties to get the necessary political process underway to secure an agreement for a functioning executive and assembly and a North-South Ministerial Council. Deputy, can I say that there is an elephant in the room here now, which is Brexit. It's been there and has had a corrosive impact, in my view, on politics in Northern Ireland. It has resulted in a polarising effect, where in many cases nationalists look to Dublin and unionists look to London for protection. That is the exact opposite to what should be happening in the context of the Good Friday Agreement and the trust and spirit of cooperation and partnership that it should be developing. That said, even with all of the pressures that continue to be there linked to Brexit and political choices that need to be made primarily in Westminster, I still think it is possible for the two governments to work together with all of the political parties to try and find a way forward and a basis for agreement that can result in a functioning executive again. As late as yesterday, I had a long telephone call with Secretary of State Karen Bradley talking about the approaches that the government should or could take to try to facilitate that engagement again. I know there is scepticism, particularly from Sinn Féin at the moment, in relation to the efforts that are underway, and I can understand that. But I think we do need to work together. I know there's hopefully we will be able to meet the Sinn Féin leadership on this issue in the next few days to try to build an understanding and a trust around a new approach that can result in a deal being done. But that has to involve all of the parties, and it needs to be a process that all of the parties can buy into. We can't have any party or group of parties vetoing anything. So, I look forward to working with all of the parties to trying to find a way of doing that where the governments can take on the responsibility that we need to take on to make sure that that the next process that's put in place actually works. I don't think we can afford another failure.
A number for supplementary from Deputy Collins.
Thanks, Taoiseach. You might, at some opportunity, ask your department to provide a briefing for us in relation to this. Taoiseach, you mentioned in your reply there that communities and political parties in the north have to have trust and confidence, that they have to believe in each other, that words matter, and that there will be proper follow-through. I'm sure you're well aware that since this session started, that the Supreme Court in the UK have delivered their decision in relation to the challenge by the Finucane family not to hold a public inquiry into the death of Pat Finucane, or the murder of Pat Finucane so many years ago, and all the collusion that was involved in carrying out that murder. It's something which usually concerns us within Fianna Fáil. Our position has been that we want to see a full public inquiry in relation to that. We know that David Cameron did a U-turn on the commitment that he gave following the Fresh Start agreement. So, whilst the judgment has said that the judgment has failed the Finucane challenge against the decision not to hold a public inquiry has failed, it has also said they've also won a declaration which has said that there has been no effective inquiry or investigation into Pat Finucane's murder. So could I ask you for a comment in relation to that? Are you in a position maybe to comment now? I know we're just doing this on the hoof, but it has the news has broken since this session started. Or maybe could we have an opportunity later today to discuss it further, because it is of very serious consequence and implication.
Thank you, Deputy.
Thank you.
Brendan Smith has tabled 2 questions.
Thank you. I'll ask Cancora. Taoiseach, I welcome your reply, and again, you don't give us any optimism in regard to the resumption or the restoration of the political institutions in Northern Ireland, and you gave us a detailed briefing at the meeting of the committee on the implementation of the Good Friday Agreement last Thursday. And as my colleague Deputy Niall Collins said, it is most regrettable that at this critical and crucial time in our island's history that we do not have an assembly or executive functioning in Northern Ireland. Similarly, it is most regrettable that the North-South Ministerial Council cannot meet. And we all know the value of that council, whether it met at council level or meeting in sectoral level. Because if those particular institutions were working, you could imagine them working on the basis of an all-Ireland approach to Brexit, working together in the best interests of all of the people of this island. Taoiseach, is there any consideration being given by yourself and your colleagues in government, along with the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, to putting a timeline on talks? I don't know, at times deadlines are valuable, they can focus minds, but I have to say from my interaction with my neighbours in Northern Ireland that they're absolutely frustrated that more than 2 years on, the institutions are not working and the Assembly is not meeting to represent the people who voted them into that office in the first place. And Taoiseach, is there a date set for further talks with the political parties in Stormont and with the Secretary of State? Because I think a clear message needs to go out to the electorate, both in Northern Ireland and indeed throughout all of this island, that some urgency will be attached to those talks to try and ensure that the political institutions established under the Good Friday Agreement are fully functioning and working in the best interests of the people of Northern Ireland, and indeed working in conjunction with our colleagues and the Oireachtas here as well. Thank you, Alaskan Court.
Deputies, the first thing can I say is that like everybody else, I'm reading on my phone this morning in relation to, while we're in the House here, on the Supreme Court decision in relation to the murder of Pat Finucane and the attempts by the family to to require a full public inquiry. Can I say that the Irish government's position is clear and remains very clear and consistent, that an independent public inquiry should be established into the Finucane case in line with the commitments made by the British and the Irish governments at Weston Park in 2001. And this has been confirmed and reaffirmed by both Taoiseach and myself when we met the Finucane family in recent months. So that is still our position, and it's not going to change, regardless of this legal decision. In relation to the legal decision itself, I haven't seen the full legal decision. I think we probably need to study it before we can make an informed commentary on the implications of that decision. But on the substantive issue, the Irish government's position remains very consistent and very firm. There was an agreement here that there would be a full public inquiry established, and that agreement has not been followed through on, and we believe it should be. So that position isn't going to change. In relation to timelines for talks, there are dangers with putting strict timelines. One of the things we've spoken to the party leaders about is whether or not there is a window, Deputy, between now and the summer to have an intensive period of talks where an agreement can be reached as a basis for re-establishing a functioning Assembly and Executive. I believe there is one, if parties want to take it. But that is something that, that the two governments are talking to the parties directly about now.
Thank you. Deputy Smith.
Taoiseach, thanks again for your reply. And I stress, you know, I think the public need to know that there's urgency being attached to the talks and to the resumption, or the restoration, I should say, of the institutions. And I think at times we talk about restoration of the Assembly and the Executive. I think we also need to emphasise the importance of the North-South Ministerial Council, meeting at North-South Ministerial Council level and also at sectoral level. And again, I would make the point that never was there a more opportune time for the workings of the North-South Ministerial Council to be optimised than at a time like this, when this island and our neighbouring island of Britain faces huge challenges due to Brexit. It would have been great, the political heads of departments meeting together to thrash out a common position in regard to the issues arising from Brexit that affect all of the people on this island. Thank you, Laskin Court.
Yeah, and you know, at a political level, Deputy, we do have the All-Ireland Civic Dialogue in relation to Brexit, and we had one only last week in Dublin Castle, which was successful again. I think it's the fifth All-Ireland Dialogue that we've had. There has been engagement also between civil servants, both in Dublin and Belfast, in relation to understanding the challenges of Brexit and the responses that may be necessary, particularly in a no-deal scenario. We've had some very good and frank discussions, I think, in that regard. But I think it is important to let people publicly know that the governments do want to inject some urgency into this issue. It may well, for example, be necessary for more legislation to be passed in Westminster to allow civil servants to be able to make practical decisions to protect vulnerable sectors in the context of a no-deal Brexit. We don't like that, but we recognise that it might be necessary. Certainly, we do not want to move towards a situation of direct rule for Northern Ireland. We can't support that and won't support that. It's totally contrary to what the Good Friday Agreement should be about. And so that is why we want to intensify efforts to work with all parties to find a way of not just getting a functioning executive again, but actually all of the institutions of the Good Friday Agreement functioning again and doing what they were set up to do, which is to create a sense of normality, partnership and cooperation on this island to reinforce the positive benefits of the peace process.